And that's because the holiness, the goodness of the church is burning me. You can see it. The churches, look at this church. You can tell they're good people. Good people go to church, okay? Bad people are atheists. Everyone knows this. It's a slippery slope to fascism when you're an atheist, especially if you're an anti-theist. That's slippery slope to fascism. Being a Christian, however, not even close to fascism, essentially being a communist. Don't you hear all the time about how churches are like charitable and they do charity and stuff and they're like helping people? Oh man, the church, you can't take the churches away because then we wouldn't have any community organizing and all the charity would fall away. All right, so you guys know in the States right now, it's wintertime. And if you've ever been in the northern hemisphere during wintertime, it's pretty cold. I live in Michigan. I don't know what's the temperature right now? Let me look at my phone. It is 4 degrees outside. That's not enough degrees. That's not nearly enough degrees. We need a few more degrees, personally, in my opinion. Anyway, here are some churches. What are they doing? More than 200 Spokane, Washington churches were asked to open their doors to homeless people during dangerously cold weather. 4 agreed. Now, I'm not very good at math, okay? I'm not very good at math. But I had math experts look this up. And I'm pretty sure that's only 2%. In my opinion, only 2% of Spokane churches should be tax exempt. What's the temperature in Spokane? Nope, not Temple. Temp. It is currently 23 degrees. It's going to start to precipitate and be in the just above freezing range, which is also not habitable. Only 4 agreed. Amazing. Let's read the story about how only 2% of churches are charitable enough to allow homeless people through their doors during a winter storm. Wow. So holy, so godly. It's the same every year. A dangerous cold snap is forecast. Hundreds of unhoused people are in danger of freezing to death, and there isn't a clear path to keep them warm. With the clock ticking, the city scrambles. Spokane Mayor Lisa Brown criticized the city's perpetual lack of planning during her run for office last year and pledged to put a better system in place. But when a blast of Arctic air descended on Spokane and brought temperatures below zero during her second week in office, she too was forced to scramble at the last minute. The system my administration inherited is not as coordinated as we would like it to be, Brown said during a Thursday meeting. Brown declared a state of emergency and said 183 additional beds would be available during the dangerously cold weather. That's not enough beds. The city's Trent Resource and Assistance Center and other local shelters squeezed in more beds. Compassionate Addiction Treatment also opened at South Division Street location as an emergency shelter. On Friday, the city reopened the Cannon Street shelter, which closed last May. So, I mean, they're just cascading failures, and they have all these different shelters. And isn't it crazy how most of them are called, like, compassionate addiction treatment? Like, how many of these are going to turn people away if they aren't Christian? Because that happens. The city's efforts this year were also aided by a small group of volunteers and homeless service providers who had spent months working behind the scenes on an ambitious project to keep people from freezing. The plan was simple: open the churches. The idea of using churches to house homeless people during cold weather has been long in the making. In theory, it makes sense. Hundreds of Spokane churches sit empty every night. With city shelter space consistently below what's needed, why not ask a faith community to help? But making that vision a reality has been an uphill battle. I wonder why the NIMBY-ass Christians don't want... They're all Republicans. I wonder why they don't want to help people. It's almost as if you are a Christian, you are more likely to be opposed to helping your community. This is now, statistically, we can look at it. There was a sort of an informal study right here. 2% of churches, when given the opportunity to help their community, will do so. Literally just opening their doors when it's not being used. I've talked before, just recently in a stream, about the churches around here that, massive swaths of land in the middle of my community. We have it's essentially like a neighborhood that is split up and broken up by these churches. And if there were community centers there with like little parks and places for all of us to socialize and not necessarily spend money, but also be able to support like small businesses like food trucks, I don't know what else you could put there. Just all sorts of things. You could have community events, amphitheater or something. Instead they have just a church that nobody fucking uses. Discontent rises. Oh, not a cloud punk, a fucking frost punk. The lack of home stirs anger. Yeah. Provide shelter for everyone. Easy. Past efforts haven't always gone so smoothly, and many churches are wary of what could go wrong. In 2021, Jules Helping Hands, a nonprofit, recently managed the East Central Camp Hope Homeless Encampment, partnered with the City Church Spokane on West Garland Avenue to operate as a warming shelter on the first-come, first-served basis. Some people ended up sleeping in the neighborhood, and nearby businesses complained about significant disruptions. We noticed the impact on the neighborhood. This has been a trial and error for us. Oh, it's crazy that you're like, why is this a problem? Okay, so we're inviting people. We're also turning people away, and then they came for shelter, and then there actually wasn't any shelter, and then they had to go find shelter. What are we to do? Well, you're supposed to give them shelter. So provide them more shelter. Provide them transportation to shelter. Help them. I saw a person, I was up late last night. It was like 4 a.m. I saw a person walking down the sidewalk in the middle of the night. And I'm glad they didn't see me. It would have seemed like creepy. But I watched them. And I watched them specifically because I was making sure that this person who was walking in the middle of the night, because I had like a backpack on, and I was making sure that they weren't just like homeless and didn't need help or something. But I think they just lived nearby and were working late or something. But we don't have a lot of homelessness here, but we have some. It's definitely enough. Despite trepidation over past incidents, a group of volunteers was able to convince 4 churches to let Jules use their buildings as warming centers during the year's cold snap, this time with a new model designed to minimize disruption. It's a big step for us, but it's simply living out our mission. The pastor, Deb Conklin. Deb, sounds like a woman. I wouldn't be surprised if these churches happen to be led by women more often. I would be shocked. The volunteer said it was a huge success and hope the other churches will see how things are going and agree to get on board in the future. Garcia says the goal is for each of the 4 churches participating in the program to continue hosting people through the end of February. Good. Minimum they can do. There's always going to be some risk, but at some point you just have to think, what are we called to do? What's the risk? Like the people that you're inviting in? Dude, I can't believe this. I can't believe it. You should just help. We just got to help people. Warming centers. That's right. You can come and warm yourself. I don't even know if they can spend the night. Thursday afternoon, 29 degrees. The Arctic air crosses the Cascades and rips towards Spokane. Garcia's at the New Apostolic Church, a small building in Spokane's Garland district with boarded up windows that's been unoccupied for some time. It's not even occupied. What the fuck? What are we worried? Oh, my fucking God. Garcia says the owner, who lives out of state and is trying to sell the building, was happy to help when the volunteers asked about using it as shelter because it's unoccupied. Jules staff members are able to operate it 24/7 as a shelter specifically set aside for women and people with intensive medical needs. The other churches need the space during the day and are open as shelters from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. The people who have problems with people being warm should have to spend nights outside in the same amount of clothing that people need warmth at. Yes. This is, we've watched a few people have, don't let the fucking people inside when they're cold. That was for immigrants. This is for homeless people now. And, of course, they're not viewed much differently by the right. There are 20 beds set up inside. That's only 20 people. Each paired with a storage crate for people's belongings. On Thursday afternoon, only one bed was occupied. The woman sleeping there came in that morning and told Garcia she had spent the night before sleeping near 2nd Avenue and Division Street, a notorious intersection that's long struggled with drugs and crime. It was the scariest thing she'd ever been through, Garcia said. She was just so thrilled to come here. She was freezing cold. She'd been wearing the same pants for 4 months. Yeah. So you got to let them know. You got to go and tell them that they have a place to go. Where are they just going to stumble across this shit? Spokane is the first test of a program that Garcia and a group of volunteers called Love Spokane have spent months pitching to local churches. The idea is each participating church will host about 20 people per night. Jules will provide 2 paid staff members at each church to stay awake through the night and keep an eye on things. People staying at the churches also have to sign good neighbor agreements that outline expectations regarding behavior and substance use. This is super reasonable. It's like, do any of you guys run charity stuff in Michigan that you'll want to hire me for? Like, do we need any of my skill set to get words out on this kind of shit?
Go.
Remember though, guys, being anti-religious is fascist, not allowed. That's right, it's fascist. It's fascist to be opposed to these religious people. Garcia says her organization initially planned to use its own budget to cover staff costs.
I'm talking about Jake, bitch.
Also, dead malls could be used for this pretty easily, but of course the landowner of the mall will be very opposed to that. When I worked at Walgreens in a very affluent zip code, we had a lot of homeless regulars and homeless staff. I'll never forget how much it hurt when one of the women who was a regular froze to death sleeping at the bus stop. What the fuck? Yeah, man, that's fucked. Thank you for the biddies. I've had limited interactions with massive swaths of homelessness. The most I ever saw was when I lived in Florida. But of course, it's warmer there, so usually the issue is like, I mean, if heat happens, but you know, the hurricanes and stuff is usually when that's a big problem. As far as like weather concerns for homeless people. Wayne County is a land of... Well, Wayne County is different. I'm saying where I live, I don't... Like, Wayne County is Detroit for those who don't live here. Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of that there. I live in a mid to small size city. It's dark, yeah. I mean, I've had my car broken into a few times. I don't know if that was like homeless people or anything, but you know, I drive around the city and you'll see like the occasional person with like a sign or whatever. But you know, it's not near the city size is not that big, and the cost of living isn't good, but it isn't like as bad as it is in some of the big cities, so it's not super impossible to get at least a hotel room or something for some people. Anyway, this could be not to be on my bullshit, but I guess that's what this show is about. We could solve this by decommodifying survival necessities. Uh-oh. DSN, I guess. The volunteers want to make sure people don't congregate in the neighborhoods and create issues for the churches, so instead of operating on first-come, first-served basis, Jules and the Spokane Low-Income Housing Consortium are using a referral system to screen guests and transport people to the churches from pickup spot at the downtown Central Library. They're also trying to avoid publicizing the address to prevent people from showing up unannounced. So this is why they're not doing it. It doesn't have to be chaotic and crazy. This is 20, 25 people at each place in the middle of neighborhoods. It's more calm. It's crazy that we have to, like, because of the... So this is an issue that you have to deal with, and this is why, you know, sometimes the approach that we're going to have to take to fix this is going to seem more chaotic at first. Like healthcare, for instance. When you legalize free healthcare, and when you make it... Well, not legalize, I guess. When you formalize universal healthcare for every person that lives here, you're going to get an influx of patients and a big bloat in the system, and they'll have to deal with that in some way. They could, preferably, they'd do it preemptively, and you just have a system, and you'd have like a, I don't know, like a triage system. What do you got going on? Let's fix it. Just do triage, but free at the point of service. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, similarly, housing would be pretty crazy at first if you decommodify that to be able to get people in the shelter, but it's necessary. the reason it's going to be fucked up is because capitalism has caused that problem, right? To clean it up will be a little messy. Like, you're not going to, it's like going into a hoarder's house and not, and expecting, like, man, I hope I don't see any dead cats in here. It's like, you're going to see some dead cats. Some dead cats are going to happen. We're going to have some messes to clean up, but in the end, it will be worth it. We'll clean house. We can do this. It's daunting, but we can do it. What does triage mean? So triage means, like, I mean, it's a communist idea, but it's it's the most. It's not a communist idea, but it sounds communist. To each according to their need. So if you're, say, if I have a cold and you have stage 3 cancer, you should be bumped to the head of the line over me, right? You should be able to get treatment because you are, more urgent. So it's about that. Or if you have an emergency, for instance, if you have a cut on your head and I have a broken finger, you should be sent to the emergency room prior to me, and I should be waiting longer even if I'm in pain. That's triage, yeah. Taking care of the most important thing first in an effort to make sure to mitigate harm on the way. That said, it'll be imperfect and people will die in the process no matter what we do in any major change for anything. People will die, people will get dropped through the cracks, but it will be less than it would be under the other system. And that's only because of the collateral damage that capitalism has caused to these systems that will happen. That's blood on the hands of capitalism, not on the socializing of the system, but it is something that the socializing of the system would cause initially. And I think we can acknowledge that, like, not that everyone would fucking die, just that it would cause some difficulties because, whatever that may be. Education would be the same thing. You'd have a bunch of people trying to, get into college right away. I mean, you'd have to, balance the staff for that and make sure that everyone's getting paid for, professorships and stuff. But then that would work better. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of shit. We don't have to get to the nitty-gritty. The nitty-gritty. I don't hate the cots and storage container situation. I know there's people in chat sometimes that stay in shelters. I appreciate you hanging out with us. The way that this country goes about this fucking problem is so abhorrent to me. It's dehumanizing. It has no dignity. Like, the way they talk about these fucking people, even when they're helping them. Thursday evening, 19 degrees on the other side of town. Ken Crary, an outreach supervisor with Jules in the basement of Liberty Park, can't go outside. He's settling in for an evening shift and training a new Jules employee. They can't go outside that gate after they come in. This is a nice warm spot to go to sleep, charge phones, but you can't go out in the neighborhood and run around. You see what I mean? Like, you have to give up your nighttime freedom to move around and be a whole ass person and do what you want, because the situation's got out of hand so much that we have genuinely, mentally unwell people within this population group due to a myriad of factors. They have been left behind by the entire fucking country and their communities, and so they are a threat to themselves and others sometimes. And, there's drug problems, and none of it's their fault necessarily. All of it, ultimately it's the fault of the system for allowing these things to happen. Like, I get it. It's pragmatic. And at the same time, I'm very fucking annoyed because this is being solved by volunteership. Volunteering? Yeah, fuck Reagan. Crary has seen the consequences of the cold firsthand when Jules was managing the city church shelter in 2021. He recalls walking to work one morning and finding an unhoused person lying motionless on the street. He was just frozen to death. Nobody wants to find something like that. It's a big deal. This could be groundbreaking if the church deal happens. The biggest hurdle is fear, because of the potential for liability and damage to the building. They're so fucking litigious and money driven. The churches are worried about liability. Oh my God. By late December, a few churches were considering the idea, but none had officially committed. As Christians, we're called to help and love and serve people, and this is such a tangible way to do it, McKinney says. Our buildings are one of the biggest things we have to offer. But then news of this year's cold snap started to spread, and things got moving quickly. Conklin put on a board. It certainly was incentive for my church to go with it, to make a choice to jump because it got cold. 4 of them. -2 degrees on Friday. Takes a few minutes to get numb. If you've ever been outside in -4 degrees, it's crazy. It's so cold. -30, even crazier. Garcia is eating lasagna with a group of volunteers and overnight guests. More people are asleep inside the main chapel, which is closed off with blackout curtains. The atmosphere is cozy like a rustic cabin in the woods. She's been... Chris Bell, 51, says she's been homeless for much of her life and knows all too well what it's like to survive in the cold. It's unbearable. You'll freeze. Oh, we read that one. She's had bad experiences at local shelters and spent recent weeks sleeping outside. She says she was able to escape the cold on Thursday by sleeping in the laundry room of an apartment complex. Did we read this already? Why is this back up? I've really been accepted. Wow. All right. Sunday afternoon. I mean, I think we get the picture at this point. It's just, we're hoping next year there'll be 15, and maybe the following year there'll be 30, hoping that more churches join. Garcia says several more churches have expressed interest, but that her organization is limited by way of lack of staff and resources, so the plans for additional churches' warming shelters are dependent on what cost the city ends up agreeing to cover. Garcia says the first few days of this operation went smoother than I ever thought it would. No calls to the police or fire departments, no major incidents or complaints from neighbors. Community has shown up in ways I've never seen. I've never been prouder of my community than I have been this last week. 2% of churches agreeing has made this lady over the fucking moon. 2%. And she's out here. She's the hero of this story. I'd willingly go and cook for all these people if they would set these places up. Yeah. I've thought about a community garden a lot. The fucking cops shut that kind of shit down. Now, I don't know about our city necessarily, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. People were handing out food to the migrants that were being housed in the Bronx or whatever, and the cops shut that down. Wouldn't allow them to get food handed to them. I mean, they're so fucking inhumane, bro. I don't know why they have to be like this. Like, money just sucked every good thing out of their personalities. Anyway, church is bad. Churches are bad. They don't help people. I'm glad that one abandoned church and I guess 3 non-abandoned churches maybe agreed to help people from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. During the winter storms. That's the big W for religion in this one. You know, if all 200 of the churches that asked said yes, they could just say, okay, go to a church and you'll be housed, and you wouldn't have any community freakouts because you could just walk to a church, right? And this problem that they were worried about of like, oh, we're going to have all these complaints and stuff. If you just followed the model and helped these people, you would have this solved. I guarantee you in Spokane or thereabouts, there's a dead mall or a similar kind of building you could help people find housing in. And you wouldn't have to charge them, and you could have a fucking steward or 3 and have them take care of the property with a staff. But no, we have to atomize. We have to make sure that every single person has to have the burden of holding themselves afloat every single day, and they have to compete with their community members every single day for those resources. But also, they're supposed to have some kind of patriotism and brotherhood. Like, how can you teach constant competition? Like, I like competition. I'm a competitive guy. I appreciate sports. I like just playing games against people. I love battles of wits. But we don't need constant competition at all levels of society. We just do not need this all day, every day. All the resources need to be fucking fought over. It's not a sustainable fucking way of life. It makes everybody stress. And they acknowledge this. Literally, the money is the root of all evil is a thing everyone fucking knows and agrees with. Competition where your livelihood is on the line. Yeah. For some reason, when you said battle of wits, I pictured you in a field like in Ireland with a sword against that sword guy.